I'm the coordinator of the forum, and today we're happy to have Harvey Wasserman here. You guys. And okay, Harvey's here. I don't know how many of you know about Harvey and his work. Okay.
I do.
Harvey, Harvey's been a long-time activist in many different areas. He's authored or co-authored many books. He has a program at KPFK, part of the Pacifica network down in LA, called Solartopia. I heard him over the years on KPFK talking about nuclear issues, extremely knowledgeable about that. And I learned a lot from his talks on the radio. He's also going to be here talking about elections and all the other things as well. So anyway, I'm really happy that he's here. I'm glad that he came up from LA to do this. He also had a program last night at the UU in Berkeley.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me here. We're going to go till 11. You'll have your service at 11, so that'll be, we do have a cap. It will seem like I'm going to talk forever, but all of a sudden it stops. So it's wonderful to see you all this morning. Go around and greet you all personally, but maybe afterwards. I do have this is my history of the United States. If you want to pass that around, take a look. People can take a look at it. I'm just finishing this book I've actually been working on for 50 years. So there you go. I'm going to talk about two things this morning. We're start off talking about the election and election protection and election theft and the Armageddon that we're facing now with Trump. I never ever say that Trump is facing re-election because he wasn't elected in the first place. And my feeling right now actually is that the Democratic nomination is a two-person race between Bernie and Bloomberg. Two 70-something Jewish guys. We'll see what happens. It's going to be a pretty interesting, amazing event. This is my, and then the second part, we're going to talk about Diablo Canyon because we do have the possibility. I'm not going to have an abstract discussion on nuclear power. This is specifically about the Diablo Canyon atomic power plant. How many of you have been arrested at Diablo Canyon? Oh, a few. More than in Berkeley. Amazing. Fantastic. I went in '84. Was in the late in the day affinity group. I spent 3 lovely nights in the San Luis Obispo County Jail. I tell people on the radio that if you're driving between LA and San Francisco and you run out of gas or money, just go to the nuke plant and sit down and get arrested, and they'll put you up in the jail for a couple of nights. Very, very accommodating. I was there with 2,000 or 3,000 of my closest friends, so that was really fun. You won't have that luxury, but and David Hartso is here, and Jan, one of the great activists of our time. David's written a book about his life. It's really fantastic, and a real leader over the years in nonviolent action. So this is my ballot. This is my absentee ballot here in LA. I live in LA now. I never thought I'd say those words. I always wanted to live. I was born in Boston, grew up in Ohio, but I always thought I lived in California. And my wife managed to buy a house at the bottom of the market. The one good thing that came out of the crash of 28 there. And so we have a house in the valley in LA, and I have a daughter and 3 grandchildren around the corner. And I have an absentee ballot. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to fill it out, and actually it has Bernie Sanders' name on it. There is a change that happened yesterday, and this is actually a monumental change. It's buried in the Chronicle on page 8, but it says you can now go in on election day and change your registration. Now, for some reason, you cannot change your registration to Republican, which I don't think is an issue in this room, but or Green, which would be. But you can change your registration to Democrat on election day. So I'll pass this around. This is a very important piece of work, and this was one of the things that happened in the last election that really changed the nomination of the Democratic Party, because the California, of course, is a good 10, 20% of the delegates to the Democratic National Convention. In 2016, if you were registered as an independent or non-affiliated, you showed up and you could not vote for Bernie Sanders in the primary because you had to have been registered Democrat. It had a huge impact on how California went, and they also did some hanky-panky in New York. It is very clear that the Democratic National Committee is bound and determined not to have Bernie Sanders get the nomination. And this to me is a profound mistake. I mean, I think we know what happened with Hillary Clinton. I think Bernie could have beaten Trump in 2016 and would be living in a very, very different world had Bernie Sanders won the election in 2016. Now, I got involved in election protection. I was living in Columbus and teaching at 2 colleges. I taught U.S. history for 14 years in Central Ohio. And I have a cohort, a co-conspirator who is a political scientist. And in the 2004 election, Bob started calling me, and we started working together on articles about how they were stealing the 2004 election. And they did. John Kerry was the rightful winner of the Ohio 2004 election. We documented, I did a book, a digest, on how about 100 different ways that the Republicans outright stole the election in 2004, and how John Kerry carried Ohio in 2004. He would have ousted George W. Bush and become President of the United States. And of course, this dates back, and I'm going to date it back a little bit, do a quick run of history, and then talk about the 2000 election, and then 2004, and then we'll be confront here. And I'll try not to go on too long, but this is at the core of our being here. And by the way, in case I lose track, I'm going to fill this out, and many of you probably are going to get absentee ballots in the mail, but I'm not going to mail it in. I'm going to walk it in. And if you really want to be secure with your vote, that is the safest thing to do. Get a paper ballot in the mail, and on election day, go into your polling place and hand them your ballot. That's the best way. Now, any ballot that's received before 7 p.m. on election day will be counted on election day. And you're far better off with a paper ballot than anything else. So this is the most secure way to vote in pretty much anywhere in the United States. Get an absentee ballot, fill it out, and then walk it in. You can mail it, and they're also now having these pickups, which I find absolutely terrifying. I mean, Bernie is having people where you can hand them your absentee ballot and hand it in. Okay, it's Bernie, but you know, it's also going to be a lot of other people. I mean, it's really not secure at all.
Well, I just want, I promise I won't interrupt again, but regarding what you're saying, you can go down right to City Hall, right down here on Van Ness, and write in person, including ask for a transfer ballot, so that you can vote the way you want to vote, being an independent in my case. And it's
Right.
open. It's
But
open.
in this case, the primary in California is more important than the general in terms of presidential. We know California is going to go for whoever the Democrat is. It's not clear who the nominee is, and California will have a huge impact in deciding whether the nominee is going to be Bloomberg or Bernie. I mean, if someone else could come up, I doubt it. And we were hearing John Kerry was making noises about running again, God help us, and also Hillary was announced. I mean, I can't imagine. You know, if she gets the nomination, I'm going to get a big sweatshirt that says deplorable. But at any rate, so make sure you vote in the primary, which is what, March 3rd, I think. And if you can do it, make sure you get a paper ballot. And if you go to the voting station and they say there's a screw up and they want to give you a provisional ballot, do not take a provisional ballot. Hold out for a regular paper ballot, because provisional ballots go right in the trash. They don't count. So I'll give a quick history. And when the United States was formed, only men could vote, and generally only people with property. It varied from state to state. The property qualifications disappeared from 1776 until by 1860 they were pretty much gone. And most people don't know this, but in 5 states in the United States, and right after the Revolution, black men could vote if they had property. And of this, women could vote in New Jersey. It was the only state in the country where women could vote, and because Jersey was Quaker influenced, it was run by Quakers, spillover from Pennsylvania, and then they took the vote away in 1808. I don't know why. And then, of course, after the Civil War, we had the 15th Amendment. Black people could vote, but the 11 former states of the Confederacy passed laws saying if you've been convicted of a felony, you cannot vote ever in your life. And then they proceeded the Jim Crow laws in the South for the next 100 years to convict every black man they could get a hold of a felony. And then they filled this horrible prison system with black men, and it was basically, a sequel to slavery. Not quite as bad, but pretty close. And so for 100 years after the Civil War, blacks in the South couldn't vote except for the 8 years between 1869 and 1877 when we had Reconstruction. And in that period of time, when U.S. Grant was president, federal troops went into the South, and you did have black and white governments. Blacks and whites got along fine in many of the southern states during Reconstruction, and blacks could vote. And then after 1877 was taken away. In the 1960s, 50s and 60s leading up, we had the Civil Rights Movement, one man, one vote, the Voting Rights Act, and black people started to vote again. And the response to that was the drug war. In the late 60s, early 70s, Nixon realized that he could win over all the Southern blacks, Southern whites to the Republican Party on issues of race, but there were still enough black people to vote in the South that if they voted, a number of the states in the South would now go Democratic. The Democrats had been the party of race and slavery, and then the Republicans came along, and then in the 60s it switched. And so from 1970s until the present, the drug war was used to suppress the black and the young vote. And I bring this up because we're seeing it again now. So, anybody want to guess how many people were arrested for drugs between the 70s and the present? 41 million. No. 41 million, now there were a few repeat offenders, but 41 million people were arrested, and that's how the Republican Party took power in this country, and it was mostly black and young people who were prevented from voting. That's how they hold the South. Now that grip is disappearing now. You're starting to see places like Georgia and even Texas flirting with becoming blue states because of the racial diversity, the change in demographic in this country. And that's what really Trump is about. He's the last gasp of the straight white man. Although I don't know if the term straight could ever be used for Donald Trump, but in any way, shape, or form. Basically, he's a mobster. But, so now what we're looking at in the 2000s are a whole new and very diverse and sophisticated ways of stealing elections. And what's happening in 2020 now, the two primary methods that the Republicans are aiming to steal this election is stripping the voter rolls and flipping the machines. Stripping the voter rolls is, what they're doing now is they've run out of, the drug war is winding down. Marijuana is actually legal in the United States in more states than it's not. Marijuana is legal where the vast majority of Americans live. And, I ride my bike around LA, and like every other block, I think I hit a skunk, but some guy walking around with, but so anyway, and so they're unable now to throw people in prison, and the laws against felon voting are now disappearing. So what they're doing is they're now saying if you haven't voted in the last 2 federal elections, obviously you don't intend to vote anymore. They send you a postcard that looks like junk mail. When it doesn't come back, they strip you from the voter rolls. That's going on all over the country, and especially in the Midwest, in places like Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio. And this year in Ohio, this year and last year, they stripped over 400,000 voters from the voter rolls in Ohio, where about 5 million people vote. So it's 10%, and it's very substantial. And this is what they're doing, and this is the battle. Now, right now, the election is being decided right now in the states where they're stripping the voter rolls. And this is what we have to take. We have to take care of. And you know, the Democratic Party, I mean, there's no there. I met Tom Harris. You know, I handed him our book on election theft. He couldn't have been less interested. If there had been a wastebasket right there, he would have dropped my book anyway. And, you know, they just don't care, these Democrats. My feeling is that the regular Democratic Party is actually more comfortable with Trump than they would be with Bernie. Because Trump, they don't have to do anything. Just put out emails, oh, this, and that, they get money, and that's all they care about. Whereas with Bernie, they have to work, and they have to accomplish something, and they have to face issues that their corporate backers don't support. So this is a serious problem, and I've taken very, you know, there's absolutely no doubt that the Democratic National Committee is as focused as possible on preventing this nomination from happening. And we'll see what happens. So the stripping of the voter rolls also applies to the primaries. The Democrats are generally not unhappy about stripping young and black people from the voter rolls. Students all over the country now are finding it very difficult to vote because there's confusion, because they're on a campus and places where their campuses are don't want to let them vote. In Texas, you can register with a to vote with a gun license, but not a student ID. So, you know, that's pretty much how it goes. Now, what happened in 2000, and I'll do this quickly, it's important to understand the second part of this, which is the voting machines and how they mess with the actual voting. And by the way, the strategy to counteract the stripping of the voter rolls is to find out who was stripped, which you can't do. They do post, there are computerized registration lists. You can't get your hands on. And so if we're going to counteract this, we have to find out who has been stripped and find the people and get them to re-register. It's a huge shot. You're talking about more than 10 million people who've been stripped from their voter rolls, but in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Florida, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and Iowa, those states, all swing states, that's where the difference is going to be made, is getting these voter rolls reinstated. So with the voting machines, what happened in Florida 2000, you had a situation, well, it happened in 1988, actually, George H.W. Bush, Bush the first, who had run the CIA, and the main business of the CIA, of course, is overthrowing other governments, and in many cases they did it by using electronic voting machines, and they perfected the electronic election theft, and Bush 1 brought voting machines into New Hampshire in 1988, and he was losing in the primary to Bob Dole, hard to conceive of, but he was down like 8 or 9 points to Bob Dole on election day in the polls in New Hampshire in 1988, and he won by 9 points. It's a 17-point flip, which is what the statisticians call a virtual statistical impossibility. And it was that election was clearly stolen in New Hampshire in 1988. And then in 2000, you had the son of the CIA, George W. Bush, or Bush the Lesser, running against Al Gore, but his brother, the other son of the CIA, was governor of Florida. And people have been yelling at Ralph Nader forever about running in Florida and flipping the election, which he didn't do. The fact is that no matter what happened in Florida 2000 with Jeb Bush as governor, George W. Bush was going to get enough votes to win. That's just how it was going to happen. They wound up with 537 votes, and I won't go into the detail. I could talk a couple hours about what happened in Florida 2000. But the other thing, they did two things in Florida 2000 that they're going to do again in 2020 if we let them. The first thing they did was they stripped the voter rolls. And Jeb Bush, the law was still on the books from the Confederacy that if you've been convicted of a felony, you don't vote. Ever. So what he did was he took a computer program and he took all the names in Florida and then he compared it was called cross-check, and he looked at all these other states, or choice point actually was called. He looked at all these other states, and if there was a James H. Brown in Arkansas that had been convicted of a felony, James A. Brown in Miami was stripped from the vote as being a possible ex-felon. And it's outrageous what they did. 90,000 people they took off the voter rolls in Florida 2000. None of whom were felons or ex-felons. Greg Palast looked into that. And then they flipped the electronic vote count. In Volusia and other counties, there were 20,000 votes that bounced around like a ping pong ball on election night, back and forth between Gore and Bush. Finally landed with Gore, but they created enough chaos that the election was thrown into doubt. But early in the evening, it was pretty obvious that Gore had won. And then and they started playing games with the electronic vote count. And the next thing you know, Bush was president by a 5-4 vote on the Supreme Court. They did have fascist thuggery that was involved in when they tried to do the recount in South Florida. There was a mob. It was called the Brooks Brothers mob. These very well dressed, Gestapo types who came in and terrorized people voting. And you know who their legal counsel was? It was Brett Kavanaugh, who's now in the Supreme Court. So there you go. 2004, the same thing. And Al Gore never fought. Al Gore went out and made a career on, talking about global. It's generally called global warming. I call it, global catastrophe, climate chaos. Amory Lovins calls it global weirding. I mean, the planet is not just heating up; it's going crazy, and we all know about that. We'll talk about that a little bit about that in a minute. But in 2004, they did more things than you could ever imagine. And both 2000 and 2004, the Secretary of State in Florida and Ohio was also the chair of the Bush-Cheney campaign. So I guess the term conflict of interest does not appear in the Bible, but there was absolutely completely shameless theft. And it happened again in 2018 in Georgia, where Stacey Abrams, first black woman who should have been a governor in this country, ran for governor of Georgia against Brian Kemp, who's a Klansman, like Donald Trump's father, by the way, and basically stole the election for himself. And finally, though, in the case of Stacey Abrams, she refused to concede. Thank God, we finally had a Democrat who refused to concede. We showed in 2004 in Ohio, we showed John Kerry's people. We showed, Columbus is not a big town. We briefed, Bob and I briefed all his people on the 100 different ways that they stole the election in Ohio 2004. Kerry conceded at 1 o'clock the next afternoon. Completely outrageous. And neither Bush, and neither Gore, nor Kerry, nor Hillary Clinton has done anything to protect our elections since then. It's outrageous. And same with Hillary Clinton. 2016, I can sit here and talk for another hour about how the Republicans stole that election. In Michigan, and we have to watch this, and these are all things we're going to have to watch in 2020. This is all going to happen again, if we let it happen. After the primary here in California, if you're concerned about the federal election and want to do something direct about it, you'll have to go to Nevada or Arizona. They're both going to be swing states. And this kind of stuff is going to be very relevant. And I'll finish with this and then we'll get into Diablo Canyon. But this is stuff we need to look for. In Michigan in 2016, Trump allegedly won by 10,000 votes. But what happened was, there were 70,000 votes that came into Michigan, which were beheaded. There were full ballots. The presumption is that people stood in line for 3, 4, 5 hours, which black people had to do in Michigan, in Flint and Detroit primarily. And the ballots in Flint and Detroit, 70,000 ballots came in without a preference of president. They were called beheaded ballots. This also happened in Indian reservations in 2004 in New Mexico. But the presumption was that these people stood in line to cast their ballots and to vote for Senate, Congress, and all this other stuff. But they didn't vote for president. So you had all these ballots come in with no preference for president. I mean, 70,000. So, and in Wisconsin, there was software in the machines that was not approved. That was bogus software, and it was illegal. And my cohort, Bob Petrakis, went in. And then there was all sorts of bad stuff in Pennsylvania as well. And Pennsylvania had a Democratic governor. So did the Democratic Party do anything about this? Not a thing. Who did it was the Green Party. Jill Stein is a friend of mine, Boston doctor, raised $7 million on the internet, and she went into Michigan and Wisconsin. In Michigan, a judge gave her a judgment and said, yeah, this is serious stuff, we need to have a recount. But the law says that if you don't have a mathematical likelihood to win, you can't file a suit. We need a candidate who could win, which would be Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton's lawyers went into the courtroom, and they refused to participate in the recount. And then Hillary attacked Jill Stein in her memoir. No, I've made very few sacrifices for the movement in this lifetime, but one of the hardest things I ever had to do for the movement was to read Hillary Clinton's account of the 2016 election. It was infuriating because I throw the book across the room 3 or 4 times. You know, outrageous. And she refused to support the recount, and then she attacked Jill Stein. And the same thing in Wisconsin. There is absolutely no doubt that a recount in Michigan in 2016 would have flipped the state to the Democrats. I mean, I had no idea. You have to ask your psychiatrist why she did this. So what we have now is a history going into 2020 of 3 Democratic presidential candidates who won their elections, had them stolen and refused to say a word about it. Gore, Kerry, and I have no idea. I can't even begin to say why these people would not do this, except they're multi-millionaires and they push them to show they just don't care. I was in a meeting once with Barbara Lee, actually, and I ran all this by. 3 congressmen were sitting there at a table, and I said, I don't get this. Why? What's this? And Barbara Lee just sat there and said, they just don't care. They really don't care. And maybe that's it. I don't know. Barbara Lee would know. I mean, you know, you're with Barbara Lee, she knows, right? So anyway, that's it on stolen elections. You know, this is an Armageddon election. Donald Trump, I never say he's going to get reelected. I mean, he wasn't elected in the first place. But if he has a second term, I do not believe the human species will survive on this planet. I mean, you know, when he's in the middle of the whole impeachment, he completely gutted all the clean water regulations. Nobody covered it. But, you know, no city in the country now is going to have clean water as a result of coming out of this impeachment situation. So I think that he's actually a space alien sent down to destroy the human race and clean off the planet for a better species. We'll have to see about that. So that's it. Does anyone want to ask me anything real quickly about stolen elections and where we're at with that? And then I'll get into Diablo Canyon. Yes?
I just don't understand someone as seemingly knowledgeable as you, and you throw your hands at me of why the Democrats just don't do anything over and over.
I cannot presume to understand the Democratic Party. I'm an American historian. This book, by the way, is available if you want it at the end. Like I said, I've been working on it for 50 years, and I follow the Democratic Party. And when you get to Clinton, when you get to the baby boom Democrats, something really weird happened. Clinton was a terrible president. Bill Clinton, horrible president. And Obama was a little better, but not much. You know, Barack Obama could have changed the world if he had not gone into Afghanistan and had really done a few other things for social justice. Donald Trump would not be in the White House, not even close. But you know, Barack Obama gave the first pro-war acceptance speech of a Nobel Prize in history. You know, it's like, so I can't presume to understand the baby boom Democrats. They make no sense to me. And you know, I was a New Leftist. Bernie, I'm very familiar with Bernie. He comes from the old New Left tradition of, you know, those of us in SDS and all the other stuff that we did in the 60s, and that's where Bernie comes from. And he's like a miracle that this thing, this kind of leftist dinosaur came through and survived. But the rest of them, the Clintons, Gore, Kerry, they make absolutely no sense to me. I just don't understand it. So there you go. Yes, sir.
Vote Democrats. And the most important thing right now is not vote for third-party candidates. I don't care how good they are, and I don't. You know, we are going to lose the election because of this. And I'm already reading on all the left-wing websites that I see. You know how the DNCC is against Bernie, how everybody is against Bernie, etc. Well, there might be some of that, but it doesn't matter. The point is, we need to.
Oh, I don't think there's going to be a significant third-party effort this year. There are going to be people who are always going to vote Green, and there's a predilection in the Democratic world. You know, the moderate to radical left continuum there to always yell at the third party. The left, always yell at the left. still yelling at Ralph Nader, and Ralph Nader had nothing to do with George W. Bush winning the election. If Ralph Nader had not won and not run in 2000, and everybody who voted for Ralph Nader voted for Al Gore, Bush still would have won, because his brother was the governor, and that's what it's had. So I will say, yes, there is a conspiracy among the Democrats to deny the nomination to Bernie. I guarantee you they did it in 2016. But on the other hand, what really matters in this election, and why I gave this talk, is that the voter rolls have to be protected and the machines have to be watched, because those machines can be flipped. So, okay, I suggested in every meeting we have a certain period of time where we jump up and down and yell at the Democrats and accuse them correctly, I believe, of denying Bernie the nomination, but then we deal with what really matters, which is protecting the voter rolls and making sure that the machines aren't flipped. And I have seen no evidence that the Democrats are ready to do that. It just really pisses me off, because they just will not listen to this. And as an American historian, I'm trying to show there's a long history right from birth of stealing elections, but after 2000 it gets really serious. I mean, the Democratic Party has won the last 5 presidential elections, for God's sakes. And 3 of them, we had the candidate walk away. So, with catastrophic results. And so, yes, okay, I've read Noam Chomsky stuff and all this stuff, and we can yell. Just go ahead and yell at all 10 Greens who might switch over. I mean, there's no there. There's no giant margin. When you're talking about stripping 10 million votes, and then you're talking about 10 Greens who might vote for the Democrats, it's a lot more fun to yell back and forth at the Greens, but the reality is it's the machines, it's the registration rolls, and it's the voting machines that are going to make a difference. And God help us. Okay, yell at the Greens, please, and yell about conspiracy theory. I have a section at the end of the book called Conspiracy Theories and Actual Conspiracies. And I can tell you, I can run through World War I, maybe Pearl Harbor, I don't agree, but certainly the Gulf of Tonkin didn't happen. Certainly there were no weapons of mass destruction. Certainly the Lusitania was carrying weapons. Certainly the battleship Maine was not so by the Spain. There's all sorts of conspiracy theories that turn out to be true. And so we can yell whether or not the Democrats stole the election, stole Bernie's nomination. The real thing was that the Democrats were too stupid to bring Bernie in. Hillary is yelling at Bernie for not campaigning for her. Bernie campaigned harder for Hillary than Hillary did in 2016 in many places. So it's really up to the Democrats at this point. But your point is well taken. I see it. Yes.
Yes. I became so upset, I don't know what year to put on it, 2000 or before that I became an independent as soon as I could and realized that that's what I wanted to do. I thank you for coming, and I thank you for expressing the way I have been viewing politics and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party since those years that I'm speaking of. I became so upset with the last Hillary election for the reasons that you said in terms of the way Bernie was treated, that I actually threw away my vote and I wrote his name in on the ballot just to make myself feel good.
I wrote in Ho Chi Minh once. So.
Well, it gets to a point where, at least, as I say, internally makes you feel better. But what bothers me now is being given what I felt was a little bit of insight to what was going to happen in the last election. Here we are with another election, and I started very early feeling very strongly about Bloomberg. And again, the reason I felt strongly about Bloomberg is that many of the things that he was giving money towards for recent years were really worthwhile things. I also felt that he could possibly be then, yes, the person, because along with the money, that would be able to defeat Trump. And at this point in time, I'm really, really hoping that this could possibly be the outcome, because again, it's going to take something very, very special to make the change.
Yeah. And
it isn't the time. I sincerely feel as the way I felt for Bernie on the last one, I can't vote for him on this one, thinking that he could be the one to overturn.
I'm not going to discuss that one way or another. The question is, will Bernie's people come along? Hillary managed to alienate the millennials. This election will be decided by the millennials. There's 86 million millennials in this country. There are more millennials than there are baby boomers, and that is increasing as we disappear. So, you know, this is, she had gone out and courted the millennials in 2016 and given Bernie the time of day, you know, she would have won by 10 million votes instead of 3 million. And the same thing is going to happen now. Whatever happens between Bernie and Bloomberg and who gets the nomination, the key is to keep the millennials and have them come out. There's a map of the Electoral College if only 18 to 29-year-olds had voted. And I put it in the next edition of my book. And if only people younger than 30 had voted in 2016, Hillary would have won with over 400 electoral votes. I mean, the whole country is blue except for this thing down the middle of red. And that's the same thing this time. Whoever gets the nomination, they have got to keep the millennials on board. That's why abolishing student debt and you know, Medicare for all, these are, you know, Bernie is not a socialist. You know, he loves to call himself a socialist. He's not. The socialist litmus test is, do you support public ownership of the means of production? And Bernie Sanders is very clear that he does not. He loves Gene Debs and he loves the American socialism. He is not a socialist. He's a New Deal Democrat, for God's sakes. He's a social democrat, which is perfectly fine. And I actually have a copy here. The key document is this one. This is the most important document of the 2020 election. It is the Economic Bill of Rights. It was read into the congressional record by Franklin Roosevelt in 1944, approved as a resolution of Congress, and it says that every American has the right to a decent living. Food, housing, Medicare, medical care, education, transportation, clothing, all those things. And it was obviously written by Eleanor, and she turned it into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that's where Bernie Sanders is at. He's a social democrat. You know, he's a New Deal Democrat. Sooner or later, they'll start downplaying the socialist thing. I'm glad you brought up socialism because it changes the mindset a little bit and all that. So if Bloomberg gets a nomination, and the key is that he has to do it here what he didn't do, which has got to bring the younger generation along. And he needs Bernie to do that. And so that's the key. There was one other question, then we got to get into Diablo. Yes.
I would just like to know, who do you think is the titular head of the Democratic Party right now?
Hillary Clinton.
What?
Yeah.
Still?
She owns it. The Democratic Party went bankrupt, and Obama didn't care. Obama, once he got in the White House, Obama couldn't care less. And the Democratic Party was bankrupt going into the 2016 election, and Hillary basically bought it. And I think she's the most powerful person in the party behind the scenes, basically. And I could be wrong.
So does that mean she will have a
She'll be the kingmaker or the queenmaker. She won't go for Elizabeth Warren, it's too far left. Certainly not Bernie. But we'll see what happens now. I mean, you got a guy with $60 billion, you know, and he's a 60-pound gorilla here, 600 pounds. Last one, yes.
I have a question. I have the microphone.
Go ahead.
Well, actually, I had two questions. You know, you can. Do you think that what happened in Iowa plays in any way to this, what you've been laying out?
I think it was totally predictable. I mean, again, it's a conspiracy theory, but why are you running a primary with untested software that came from the Clinton campaign? It was ridiculous. A total joke.
My other question, and that is that there have been organizations across the country at different times that have called for people to go in the streets in large numbers, as people around the world have been doing. Given the fact that all the things that you said about the corrupt system on every level, why have the people of the United States not taken more initiative to actually get in the streets and fight this out there?
Well, they did at the beginning. As you remember, there were huge demonstrations, and now you have Jane Fonda going out and doing it, which is fantastic. You know, I mean, who knew about Jane Fonda? I was mystified when she married Tom Hanks. What is this? It's Jane Fonda. Well, she turns out to be every bit as radical as Tom Hanks. And so we'll see. Getting in the streets is it's unclear. You know, we have to be prepared. If Trump loses, pray God, and there's a legitimate reason to believe he's lost the election and he refuses to leave, because he knows that Donald Trump, if he leaves the White House, is going to go to the big house. I mean, you know, he's a crook, he's a mobster, and don't get me going on his mob roots. But you know, we will have to think in terms of a general strike. The only thing that may get what Trump out is a general strike, and that's what we're going to have to start thinking about. Big demonstrations are good, but they're not going to turn the tide in this country. We've had a history of big demonstrations, and they've had their impact. But when push comes to shove this time, I think a general strike is going to happen to get him out of it. Yes, last one.
Most people in the room probably know this, but I don't. I don't really care so much about local or national candidates. I just want to make sure that a Democrat takes office. What can I do? Either here in San Francisco, or do I need to travel?
Yeah, in the fall, you'll have to go to Arizona and Nevada. I mean, if you really want to be on the ground. The primary here, as I say, is extremely important, but once the primary is over, clearly California is going to go for whoever the Democrat is. So if you really want to impact the presidential race in the fall, Arizona and Nevada are going to be very crucial. And I will say one thing, and this will be a segue into the nuclear thing. Donald Trump actually did something good. It's the first time. Last week he canceled Yucca Mountain. Yucca Mountain is this ridiculous waste dump that they've built and not built and built and not built in Nevada, and I've been through it. I've seen the earthquake fault that goes through the Yucca Mountain for the high-level nuclear waste storage, and Trump has been supporting it, and then all of a sudden he pulled the plug because he wants to carry Nevada, and there's 80% opposition. It's outrageous he did this, but there he did it, so what can I tell you? And now this segues into nuclear, okay, and we have a half hour. So the number one issue facing California in terms of our survival, physical, biological, species survival in this state is Diablo Canyon. These two reactors are still there. They opened in the mid-'80s, so they're more than 30 years old. Who in here is driving a 30-year-old automobile? Who would trust PG&E to work on your 30-year-old automobile? So, you know, what we have here is these two reactors that are falling apart. They are embrittled. I won't go into the detail of that, but it's bad. They're cracked. We don't know 100% for sure that they're cracked, but high likelihood. They have deferred maintenance. In other words, PG&E does not take care of them. I think what they should do, they should big plaque at PG&E headquarters. We defer maintenance. I mean, that's what they do. You know, they're deferred maintenance. They deferred maintenance on the pipes in San Bruno in 2010, and they blew the place up. It's outrageous what they did. Completely predictable and unforgivable. They literally blew up 19 homes in San Bruno and killed 8 people. And then, of course, we know what they did in Northern California, and the Bay Area was filled with toxic smoke. Should have been abandoned. I mean, you know, I wasn't here, but we had fires in LA too. And, you know, it was did not support life here, the air in the Bay Area because of those fires. And Paul has been going to Paradise, and I'm going to give him 5 minutes in a couple minutes, but the reality is that in addition to those things, there's a list, and we have a petition, which is at solartopia.org, which you can sign. And I would like to have some people take the lead here in Northern California to sign this petition asking our wonderful Democratic governor, Gavin Newsom, to inspect Diablo Canyon. I mean, this place has not been inspected for decades. We don't know what kind of shape it's in. Well, we do, but we want to see exactly. And the Unit 1 is older and worse than Unit 2. The problems in Unit 1 that are even worse than the problems in Unit 2, having to do with the welds and so on. We know that Diablo cannot withstand an earthquake. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission's own resident inspector, a guy named Dr. Michael Peck, was at Diablo for 5 years. He wrote a report concluding that Diablo could not withstand a credible earthquake. And they buried the report, and they buried him. They sent him to North Carolina. He's no longer with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, Michael Peck. And they turned his report, which should have shut the plant immediately, a differing personal opinion, professional opinion. And so we have a document from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission saying that Diablo Canyon cannot withstand a likely earthquake, for God's sakes. You know, and the prevailing winds are from north to south, but I guarantee you that if there's a catastrophe at Diablo Canyon, the radiation will come here and wipe out the Central Valley and wipe out Los Angeles. I mean, we're talking about the apocalypse here. God forbid. Okay, we've seen it at Fukushima. And only the tip of the iceberg, and they're not going to dump water at Fukushima into the Pacific. So God help us. And they can't manage the nuclear waste there, and they have no competence, absolutely no competence. We all know what PG&E is about. The last thing is a joke. The last thing on earth you want is PG&E running 2 nuclear reactors. I mean, give me a break. You know, so we've begged the governor to at least inspect these 2 reactors, and refused to respond. We have petitions signed by Jane Fonda, Martin Sheen, Lily Tomlin, you know, the whole Hollywood left has signed this thing, like over 2,000 signatures. Please go to solartopia.org. It's there. The site may give you a problem, but email me. This is here. This is my card. Please email me. I would like someone to take the lead here in Northern California. You know, Northern California is the bastion of activism, but Southern California, we had tremendous movement down there. We got a dozen cities, towns, counties, party headquarters to sign on to this petition. Over 2,000 signatures have moved on, and the governor has not responded. Not a word from the governor about this. So let me just finish this. So now there's a new development. Okay, we've been begging. We had a shutdown at Diablo to refuel, and they could have gone in there, and it's very cheap. I mean, it's a couple of $1 million. We could do a bake sale and pay for the inspection at Diablo Canyon. It is not a big deal to do. And when they shut the refueling, you go in and you do it. It's not rocket science. But he didn't respond. And I know we got the petition to him. We had someone who was related to him, we gave it to him. And not a peep. And now all this stuff about taking over PG&E, right? And they're in bankruptcy, for God's sakes. They've been in bankruptcy twice now. This is the second bankruptcy. And, big Wall Street guys have come in and taken over the place. And it's utterly outrageous. And you see all these articles in the Chronicle, in the front page of the New York Times, the front page of the LA Times, all these big articles, will Gavin Newsom take over PG&E? And they never mentioned Diablo Canyon, the 800-pound gorilla, the biggest asset, and we don't know how much it's worth, but it would appear to be the biggest asset that PG&E has. And how do you go into a bankruptcy and not take financial account of the biggest asset of the company involved? It's also the biggest heat emitter in California. You're talking about global warming, and they keep calling it zero carbon. It's complete nonsense. All nuclear plants emit carbon, radiation, and heat. And if you don't think that Diablo emits heat, go look at the marine life in Avila Beach, which isn't there anymore. So, but now there's a new development. We have discovered John Geesman, G-E-E-S-M-A-N, was a major player at the Public Utilities Commission. And he discovered a filing that PG&E made. They are asking to be compensated by the ratepayers for the power that comes from Diablo Canyon. Now, there's a deal in place to shut Diablo Canyon by 2025. It was signed by 3 environmental groups, and one of which has jumped ship now. And John Geesman is with that group. It's called the Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility, with a 4 in the middle there. And you can go to their website and read his filing. And what has happened is that PG&E has been keeping Diablo open, but it can't compete anymore. Diablo Canyon cannot compete with wind or solar or gas. And so they're selling power into the grid at above market prices. To the extent that in 2017 or 2018, they were over market. In other words, the amount of electricity they put in, the ratepayers of California had to pay $400 million more than they would have on the open market with wind and solar. And in 2019, it was over $1 billion, 1.1 plus billion dollars, the electricity from Diablo Canyon cost over market. The same electricity that they produced could have been bought from wind and solar for $1 billion less. And if this continues till 2025, and they continue selling over market power from Diablo Canyon, it's going to be $7 billion in excess electric power costs coming from Diablo Canyon to keep this place open that could blow up and wipe us all out. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. Now, who's keeping the plant open? Most is the IBEW, because they've got 1,000 people working there at big money, and they want to preserve Diablo at any cost, and they terrorize the Democrats, and the Democrats will not mention Diablo Canyon for fear of getting lynched by the IBEW. You also have the local community. The deal that was cut was the local community was getting compensated, the union was getting compensated, the state would, and the PUC would make certain deals, and then it would shut in 2025. We don't want it to go to 2025. And as if you use PG&E's own numbers, it's going to cost $7 billion to keep going. For God's sakes. Last year alone in California, 1,700 megawatts of wind and solar were installed. Diablo was 2,200. So, and obviously the continued installation of solar and wind is a major factor in the economy of California. So this is where we're at now. And we know that the numbers are on our side. It's a great miracle of the anti-nuclear movement. When we first started fighting nuclear power with the Abalone Alliance in New Hampshire, Clamshell Alliance, all these alliances where people were arrested at the nuclear plants, people said, well, where are you going to get the power if you don't have nuclear power? And we said, wind, solar. We had no idea what we were talking about. And there was no industry there. But the technology of wind and solar is absolutely exploding. It's going to be on all predictions for the price drops in wind and solar have been exceeded by the technology, and it's been joined by battery technology, which has changed everything because intermittency is no longer an issue, and increased efficiency, LED lighting, and all the other stuff that comes with that. It's nothing short of miraculous. And so at this point in time, you can replace Diablo Canyon. There's no need for the power from Diablo Canyon. Zero need. If Diablo Canyon went offline right now, not a light would flicker in the state of California. There's absolutely no reason for the plant to continue to operate in any way, shape, or form, economically or in terms of producing, supplying electricity. And in fact, because Diablo Canyon is base load, in other words, when it's operating, it operates at a steady pace, doesn't fluctuate with demand, but there is fluctuation of demand, and so Diablo fills the grid and prevents wind and solar from coming online. So because Diablo operates, many wind and solar plants have to shut down when demand drops. And the wind and solar is cheaper than Diablo Canyon's electricity. Just flat out capital is cheaper, but they continue to run the plant. It's completely outrageous. So Paul, do you want to say a word or two?
Yeah.
And then we'll, yeah, so this is Paul Keynes. And Paul has been to Paradise and, go ahead.
The number one issue we face in the world today is global warming. Okay, so what can be done? What can you as an individual do to stop global warming? This is pretty shocking. As Harvey just mentioned, the battery technology has gone so far now that you can actually, if you live in an apartment, you can now get a single solar panel and a solar-powered battery from a company called Goal Zero that will allow you to boycott PG&E and power your apartment with one solar panel. Has anybody ever heard or seen anything like that? You go on YouTube and you can see it. Look up the company. Well, I put it on this flyer. Anybody wants a flyer? Goal Zero has invented this thing. And the state of California just bought 10,000 of these things during the fires in Northern California and gave them people with CPAP machines and other machines they have to have for life support. So this is the technology. Now, why we have Diablo Canyon is interesting. I was talking to John Geisman last night, and he was saying the one thing that they're doing is they're bribing the workers at Diablo Canyon. The workers at Diablo Canyon know the danger they're working in. They know that they're mortal. They know they're working at a job, just like Fukushima, where there could be an accident or a defect and an earthquake. And so they could lose their life and their job in one explosion. If you want to talk to PG&E workers, it's easy. I talk to them all the time. Whenever I see them, I talk to them. But they are key to turning this thing around by convincing them to, they raise their own wages anytime they want to. And PG&E and the Pentagon support giving the Diablo Canyon workers as much money as they want, because why do we need Diablo Canyon? Because it produces atomic bomb materials for our atomic arsenal. The United States is still an atomic country. So that's what we have to do. We have to see that the way, so I'm in Paradise, California, building a fourplex house. Why? Because if you build enough fourplex houses, you're able to shut down the grid and the atomic energy. This is how Germany has shut down all of its atomic energy plants. How many people here know that Germany used to have atomic reactors to power their electricity? Because they don't have oil. So, okay, how many do they have left? How many reactors do they have left? That's right, 0.
Well, there's one.
There may be one left, but what they've been doing since Chernobyl is shutting down every reactor. How did they do it? This guy named Herman Scheer, look up Herman Scheer on the YouTube, and I read his books called Energy Imperative. He came to the parliament and said, we can shut down all the nukes after Chernobyl. He said, we can shut down all the nukes if we each build a fourplex house with 100 solar panels. So I'm in Paradise, California, building a fourplex house with 100 solar panels. Why? Because I have 14,000 empty lots up there. So I need to build one in order to demonstrate to how the whole town can be rebuilt. We can do one here. If anybody is interested in building a fourplex house here, I will help you. I will show you how. I'll take you to the bank, get you the loan, get you some money. If you want to build a fourplex house with 100 solar panels. Because this is how Germany shut down the nukes and built an awful lot of windmills. So this is what I do. If you're interested in helping me with the Paradise Project or building a fourplex house here, talk to me after, but I got to give the microphone back to...
one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
One question, okay.
Okay, your flyers.
Legislation that we now have. You can't build fourplex houses in San Francisco unless we get some sort of thing that says we're going to make an exception. SB 50 will be an exception. If you have an empty lot, your house burns down and you want to build a fourplex, you'll be allowed to build a fourplex. But Wiener wanted to do it at the transportation hubs, which was okay with me. But I need that law passed to build in Paradise. I've been working in Paradise since the fire happened. And you can't build fourplex houses in Paradise because there's a zoning law that says you can only rebuild a single family home. So I've got 25 families up there that want to build fourplex houses. I'm going up again next month to talk. We're having another general meeting there in Paradise. Going up again to talk about why we have to have a law passed to allow an exception to the zoning code. Thank you.
Okay, very good, thank you. And the bottom line here is that showing Diablo is actually within grassroots. It's going to happen. Thank you very much, Paul. Paul's work on solarization is critical to this. We have a 6-month window here with Diablo Canyon. The PG&E is in bankruptcy. The bankruptcy needs to be settled by the summer. And Gavin Newsom has pretty much the authority to do whatever he wants to do. So we're seeing all this debate about should PG&E be taken over. The logical thing to do with PG&E is to take it over and then break it up. It can't be run. It's not a viable operation at the size and nature it is. There's all sorts of things got to be done with the generation and with the transmission and separation and so on. City of San Francisco, as you know, offered to buy PG&E's assets. That should happen. PG&E should just no longer exist. And Gavin Newsom was talking very strong language about how it should no longer exist, but he doesn't talk about the gorilla, the 800 power gorilla in the room, which is the 2 reactors at Diablo Canyon. If the state takes over PG&E, what happens to Diablo Canyon? No one wants to talk about that. And so it's incumbent on people here, you need to sign this petition, please, and we need to get to have it inspected. Now, our window at Diablo is the fall, because Unit 1 is going to go down and for refueling. This is a given. They have to do this. And what we want is for them to not reopen. Diablo Canyon goes down for refueling. They should sell the fuel, and they should stay shut. And when Diablo 1 goes shut, Unit 2 will shut too, because it doesn't make sense to run just the one reactor. But this is within our grasp. So Gavin Newsom has the power. It's rare because, you know, the feds have preempted all safety decisions on nuclear power plants. But the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is now run by Trump appointees. You have 5 commissioners, 3 of them are Republican, 2 Democrat. When if there's a Democrat, God willing, then there'll be 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans. That's how it works. But you have 3 Democrats on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that are complete zombies. I mean, they totally own and operate by nuclear industry. So having 0 meaningful regulation at Diablo Canyon, as if we ever did. So this is the opportunity. The combination of the bankruptcy and the impending refueling, if we can get, we have to pressure the governor, we have to put Diablo into the dialogue here. We can't just be talking about whether or not PG&E can be taken over or broken up. The reality is, what do you do with the nuclear plants? The state of California can't run 2 nuclear plants. PG&E can't run 2 nuclear reactors. What's going to happen with them? So we have to, you know, and the problem we run into is that people say, oh, it's going to shut anyway. And it will. It's supposed to shut in 2025. Do you want to wait till 2025? Who in here can tell me exactly the date that the San Andreas is going to go off? You know, I mean, I saw in China, they did this movie. Who saw the movie San Andreas? Another great sacrifice they made for the movement. I went to see this movie. If you go see San Andreas, take something to read. I mean, it's ridiculous. This is unbelievable. But they did a whole movie about the San Andreas fault right in California, never mentioned nuclear power. No, it's as if Diablo didn't exist. Mind-boggling that they could do this. And that's what's happening. There's a selective amnesia here in this state, completely a blind eye, turning into 2 reactors, which is the most important thing in the entire state. God forbid that something should happen there. I mean, it's over. The California economy will never recover. Millions of people will die. LA will be a wasteland. I mean, I'm sorry to talk in apocalyptic terms, but the, you know, Central Valley will be dead, and the car will come up here, because eventually the wind does go that way. So we have the opportunity. They're in bankruptcy. We have to get Diablo introduced into the bankruptcy proceedings. We have to get Gavin Newsom to, he knows Diablo's there. It's not like he doesn't know it's there, but he won't talk about it. He won't face the reality here of what really could happen at that plant, and why it has to be shut immediately, and why it covers the entire bankruptcy, and why it covers the whole idea of the state taking over PG&E. The state cannot take over PG&E without dealing with Diablo Canyon. And you know, we can't allow this reactor to continue. So that's the timetable. Summer for the bankruptcy, fall for the refueling. We need it inspected, but even more now, we know that they're going to lose $7 billion. They can buy the whole union for 1 year of avoided generation at Diablo Canyon, which is worth more than $1 billion. You got to understand, the CCA movement has been incredibly effective. I mean, we do have movements that are effective. More than half of the customers in PG&E service territory have left PG&E. So what did they do? They installed an exit fee. What is an exit fee? If you go shop at Walmart, and then the next, God forbid, and then the next week you shop at Target, do you have to pay Walmart a tax for going to shop at Target? No, but they're telling Open and all the other CCAs that if you leave PG&E, you've got to pay a tax. Even if you don't buy electricity from PG&E anymore, they're charging you for Diablo Canyon, and the PUC is allowing them to do this. This is outrageous. And so it's not, this is not an abstract issue. Cynthia Papermaster in Berkeley is trying to have a withholding, where you withhold a part of your bill. And that will really annoy them. And you don't need many people to do that. A couple hundred people would be sufficient to gather some media, you know. So we got to get the governor, we got to get the media. I have been writing to the media. I have this petition with Jane Fonda, all these stars. I have gotten we've gotten zero media attention on this. When Jane Fonda signed our petition to inspect Diablo, I thought we won. I thought it was over. And, you know, they won't even cover it in Los Angeles, for God's sakes. So this is where we're at with this. So you have my card, email me. David and, you know, the activist groups here in San Francisco need to deal with this. Don't be shamed by Los Angeles. I got everybody in Los Angeles to sign this thing. And there's nothing going on here. So we got it, and Gavin's right here. We should have a demonstration in Sacramento. We should be at PG&E, and the Diablo, until they pay attention to this thing. And that changes everything. So yes, please. The big players have come in to take over PG&E. The time is now. We have 6 months at most to shut the bankruptcy and the refueling. It's a very clear deadline. There's a petition at moveon.org. I gave you my card. Feel absolutely free to write me, please. And let's do this, and don't be shamed by Southern California. We have a very powerful movement down there, and there's not one here. So let's do that, and let's get it shut. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Harvey.
Thank you.
This is a conversation that needs to get clear. We'll be looking in the future if anybody has any other ideas. Speakers that can talk about this particular issue. Really need to.
I will sign your book if you want. I have posters as well. And you've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much.